All right, so we're going to get started now. First of all, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining in today. I'm really excited to share the story of HubSpot and how HubSpot's used search across their help center to really create an awesome user experience and help users get the most out of their product. So this is Barrett Johnson speaking here. I'm the content lead at Swiftype. So if you've ever logged into your dashboard or watched any kind of tutorial videos on our website, it's probably me you're listening to talk. Among other things here, I try to create webinars, case studies, and other material to help users kind of understand how to get the most value out of Swiftype. I'm joined here today by David Hunt, who's our contact at HubSpot. He's the technical program manager. I'll let him introduce himself a bit further along when I hand the kind of presentation over to him. But just to kind of start off, there's a few housekeeping items I just wanted to touch upon briefly. So to begin with, the recording and slides will be made available. I'll send that all in an email out to everyone this afternoon once the recording is done. If you have any questions throughout, please feel free to chat them directly using the questions option. We have left space at the end for David or me to answer any questions you guys have. So keep them coming. We love questions, and we want this to be an interactive session. Along that same line, we have one poll question at the beginning, so we'd appreciate if you guys come write in and answer one of those questions. Other than that, there will be a quick 2-minute survey at the end. We'd love to get your feedback on how we're doing and what other content you'd like to see either in this webinar or future webinars. So we really appreciate your feedback on that. I'll go ahead and let David just introduce himself briefly here, and then we'll get started. David?
Hi, this is David. I'm a technical program manager at HubSpot. Most of what I do is various initiatives around scaling the support organization, as well as sort of improving customer experience and some of our self-service assets. Cool.
Well, thanks again, David, for joining us today. So let me just briefly go over the agenda before we get started. I'm going to start off kind of talking about some of our own research about what's going on in the self-service support area, share with you some of our findings, and give you an overview of our stance on kind of how we approach this space. And from there, I'm really going to hand it off to David and let him walk you through what they've done on their help center and what their kind of guiding philosophy has been, why they needed search to be such an integral component of it, and how they really use that. And then at the end, Q&A. So I'll just start off by sharing this poll. I would curious to hear from you guys about how you guys look at the goal of your company's knowledge base. So I've launched this poll now. You should be seeing it. And I'll give you guys a couple minutes to go ahead and answer. And yeah. All right. It looks like everybody's pretty much in there. So I'm going to close it and show the results. So as you can see, it's kind of a mix. I was curious about this question because we see a number of different types of use cases from our customers, whether that be kind of the more traditional, simple approach, which would be kind of case deflection, trying to reduce that amount of support burden. On the other hand, we also see people who are not as focused on just that simple metric and are more trying to create resources and comprehensive guides to help users really get the most value out of the product. But in most cases, as you can see, the majority of the cases here, it's usually a combination of the two of them. So I think David can speak to what extent that's true at HubSpot. I know that he's discussed it with me, and he'll get into that a bit further along. Now, so what I wanted to just kind of touch on is some research that we've uncovered. Forrester's done numerous reports about this kind of space, and this year, in the more recent report, they revealed that online self-service is the most widely used channel for users to resolve issues they're having with a product, and this is now the first time that it's displaced telephone. It makes sense given that users are so internet-driven and internet-centric these days. And and you can see that the statistic below, 72% of customers prefer self-service than having to actually go in and file a ticket or do a phone call or email. So, continuing on that same research, you can see Forrester's done kind of a financial calculation of what it would cost you as a company to, pursue various options of supporting your users. And no surprise, it's a lot cheaper to have people resolve issues on their own than it is to have employees helping them on an individual level. So for us here at Swiftype, what we wanted to do was focus on specifically search and how users are using self-service search. Because, for us, it's an important part of how we determine relevance is figuring out how users use search engines. And so what we wanted to do was look at specifically knowledge bases, and we took our large network of knowledge base customers and analyzed over 15 million queries to find out kind of what length these queries usually are. So as you can see, the vast majority of these queries coming in are just 1 or 2 words. So people might be asking, email or email template. They might just be writing a couple words. And so 94% of queries are 3 or fewer words. So, coming away from that finding, we concluded here that, really good search on a knowledge base should be powerful, which means from the start, it has advanced language recognition technology that can parse meaning and deliver relevant results for exactly what we just kind of uncovered, which is just 1 or 2 or 3 word queries. But beyond that, it should be flexible, and that's something that David will touch on a bit later about how his uses Swiftype, and that's all about customizing your results and really optimizing the performance over time, because relevance is one half of the equation, we think, and the other half is refining search to make it work for your organization. So briefly, I'll just introduce HubSpot. I'm gathering that if you're already on this webinar, you might have an idea of what HubSpot is or who they are. HubSpot is a major inbound marketing platform with thousands and thousands of customers, and each of those customers has many, many users, so users all over the world. So you got a lot of people who are going to be coming to them to try and figure out how to use their product to the best, get the most value out of it, and that essentially is going to come down to HubSpot Academy. So from here, it's really all David. I'll hand it off to you, David, and I'll let you walk everybody through what was going on at HubSpot before you started investing in search, and what your guys' goals were, and how you approach support in general.
Thanks, Barrett. So I mean, basically, where we kind of started with all of this was, HubSpot is, at the end of the day, HubSpot is makes marketing and sales software, but kind of underlying that is this concept of inbound, which is the idea of creating marketing content and basically creating content that people actually want, right? That's contextual, that's human, that's helpful. So with HubSpot Academy, which is sort of our help center, is basically the idea was, okay, like we not only want to teach people how to use our product, but we also want to essentially teach them to do better marketing, teach them sort of like the inbound methodology. And so like kind of right off the bat, it's like our problem was a little bit more complicated than just like, okay, deflecting tickets or just, showing people how to use the product, because we ultimately were sort of, changing the way people work a little bit. And sort of the idea of inbound not only sort of informs, our marketing and like the way we do sales, but also very much the way we do support. So even though, we look at HubSpot Academy as a way to sort of have, people self-serve, we ultimately still have people you can call. We have an inbound phone number. We'll call you back. We have a callback feature, email. We run some chat experiments. So really the idea is that like we don't want to lose that. We want to keep that human helpful component for people who need it, but we also want to create the best learning center for not only our products, but also for marketing and sales in general. So that was sort of like a big ambitious goal kind of to start us off. And, while we look at things like the number of tickets we get every month and we track that, in very, we definitely keep an eye on that. That's not the goal of our knowledge base, wasn't to necessarily significantly impact that as much as to move the type of questions we're going to get. The idea being that a lot of what people ask us, when people call in and email us and are using our product, are about basic, how do I do something, or how do I, use this feature, or what does this do? And we wanted to sort of address those things and kind of get people past that, so then, they can really, if they're engaging with us, we can help them at kind of a deeper level. So they're adopting our product more, they're using more features, they're basically really engaged, and we're helping them actually solve problems for their business versus just like, how do you use our app, or what does this button do? So that's sort of like kind of gives you a little bit of an idea about what we set off to do. So now getting into a little bit about like what actually is HubSpot Academy. HubSpot Academy started out as this sort of our learning center. We had video tutorials, but really like that was about it. We had documentation on a separate site. We had designer, developer documentation on separate sites. We had all these sort of like really some pretty great content, but it was in a lot of different places. And sort of under different brands. We had like knowledge.hubspot, which was one brand and that had kind of its own branding. And so we realized that one of the first problems that we wanted to solve with HubSpot Academy was bring everything under one roof for kind of our core persona, which is sort of a mid-market, 20 to 200 employee companies that HubSpot is really, going after. And so this, HubSpot Academy was sort of founded not only to sort of address the product questions and how do I use the product, but also to just, help people learn how to do better marketing, do modern marketing. So what we started to do, and we'll kind of get into, is how we started to use search was we basically needed to unify all these different assets, all these different domains that some of them at, the time were on different systems. So we actually had, stuff living on HubSpot's content management system called the COS. We also had, at the time, we had a couple different domains living on force.com and all these kind of different systems that we ultimately wanted to pull under kind of this one brand. So search was sort of like our initial play to do that, rebranding those assets, but also just, creating a search that could work across all of these different resources. So you can see in that screenshot there, we have basically things like user guides and quick answers, which are sort of around the actual core marketing product, but we also have things like around sales. We have webinars, which is called broadcasts. We have step-by-step sort of projects that will actually take you through executing a certain aspect of your marketing campaign. Additionally, we have other resources that are we don't surface by default, but they're in there as well. Things like designer and developer documentation, the Academy blog, so stuff that certain people might be interested in, but not necessarily our core Academy user. And what's great about this is it sort of gives people a way to choose what they want to actually, like look at. So if for example, if you're using this and you find that you're looking for actually more stuff either around how to use the design tools in our product, or specifically like code examples and our our templating language, you can check on designers and you can search that, and those will just filter right into your results, which is really awesome. So moving along, we're also able to basically using the search sort of lock down certain assets. So like, for example, our video training is a customer only asset. So it's basically we have people who are actually kind of walking you through it on video. And so in order to actually get to that, we're able to mix those in and have people log in, detect whether or not they're logged in, and have them log into view. So that's just like another kind of cool feature that you could potentially build into your search, is locking down certain content that you might want people to actually take some kind of further either conversion step or just be like logged into your system. And so what we're really able to do here is pull together all these different domains. So these are just some of the domains that we have in our our main search: sales.hubspot, academy.hubspot, developers.hubspot, and designers.hubspot. If we were starting over again, right? Like if you were starting tomorrow, it might make sense to sort of have them more or less on subdirectories or however you want to manage that. But ultimately, we had these large sets of content in different locations, and at the time on different systems. Now it's pretty much all on HubSpot. So search was able to kind of unify that and pull that into one experience. And so moving along, then there's there's an example of just like the designer's doc, and what we're able to do here is when somebody searches on this particular domain, like if you come directly to designers and you search here, we're actually able to bring you to the same search and just filter for designers. So we do the same thing with developers. So the assumption we're making there is that if you're coming to those particular subdomains, we're expecting that you're looking for a particular type of documentation, and rather than having to build out a bunch of different searches or like not giving people the ability to kind of self-select what they want to search, we're using the same search experience. We're just doing some pre-filtering basically based on the what domain they're on in the form that they're ultimately searching through. So HubSpot Academy sort of addresses the self-service experience outside of our actual app. It's basically it's publicly accessible. You can you can also find us through Google or any other search engine. What we also wanted to do is start to bring in that that self-service experience and that kind of contextual support experience within our app. And the reason why this is really important to us is because once again we sort of we're okay with you calling us. We like talking to people. We like helping people overcome any kind of obstacles with our product or just help them achieve their marketing goals. But ultimately, we also know most people don't necessarily want to talk to us. Some do. Some people like to just email us or give us a call. But we want people to be able to get unstuck in a way that's as frictionless as possible. So if you're trying to draft an email or you're trying to learn how to read a report or something, we have a little help button that you pop open. And this is actually using, not only is there a search there, but we're also querying Swiftype in this case to show those like pre-pinned results. So you can see there's some automatic suggestions before they've even typed anything in that screenshot. So it's kind of a way to, based on where you are in the app, we'll give you some suggestions on what we think you might be looking for. But if not, there's also the search right there. So, and that will bring you to the same Academy page. So you'll kind of be brought outside once you search. You'll get results right in the app, but then when you click through, it'll ultimately bring you to the knowledge base. But we're doing some interesting things like where we're actually just showing you the full docs in the app now. So that's kind of like in the works, and that's a pretty cool feature. So like you don't even have to leave our app at all. You're just able to kind of see it right in the that little panel and expand that panel, which is pretty cool. Some other sort of upcoming projects and challenges that we have is, now that we have a pretty solid search across all these different assets, is we're starting going into different markets, and with that, we're going to have different sort of knowledge bases with different amounts of translated materials. So in this case, we have here's a screenshot of our Spanish search. So we're sort of, as what's another nice thing about the way we built this out with Swiftype is being able to build multiple engines. We can ultimately index content differently, so we can index only a subset of our Spanish content or our German content, Japanese content, and basically tie our search into those engines. So, when someone comes to these, we're searching just the resources that are relevant in that language and also, published in that language. So another upcoming project that we're sort of working on that is launching, or if it hasn't already launched, is building a search for sort of another kind of subset of our customers, which are HubSpot partners. So HubSpot partners are agencies and resellers who are essentially, working on the HubSpot platform. And there's certain resources that don't apply to kind of our, our core demographic of, marketing customers or just designers or developers. We really, this is, things like how do we register leads with HubSpot, or, like the partner agreement, all these kind of different resources that people need to find. So being able to sort of create a hub for them is really important, and search, once again, kind of solves that problem of having all of these different resources in different locations. Can pull it all together, and kind of then we have a central location to direct those users.
Great. David, why don't you expand a bit now on how you guys actually use Swiftype to improve your search over time and in general get a better sense of what users are searching for?
Yeah, definitely. So basically, like you saw in all those screenshots, what kind of the front end of our search looked like, and essentially what we did was we built, out a front end to the search using AngularJS, and HubSpot's templating language, and by doing that, we were able to sort of like create the user experience we want, but then send certain information to Swiftype and make a request from Swiftype's API to essentially return the information that, the different filters and everything that we wanted to do. And by passing all that information to Swiftype, things like, the number of searches and what people were searching and what people were clicking, we're able to sort of use the analytics to actually get some, actionable data to improve the search. So what's cool about that, and what's cool about, sort of the way that we've done this, is that not only are we able to, really kind of control the sort of ultimate end user experience, but we ultimately can then get into Swiftype and, look at this data. So for example, some things that we look at are, top searches, right? What are people searching during a given time? Top autocomplete searches. So what are, people auto-completing with? What are they clicking through? So what we've kind of set up there's this, at HubSpot we have sort of a knowledge-based team. It's pretty small. It's really just a couple of individuals and a few people who kind of help out with split shift work. But what we've kind of been able to do with Swiftype is sort of get into a regular cadence of looking at this data and actually trying to improve results. So we can look at things like what are people searching that where they're not finding a result, right? And then we can use Swiftype to actually improve those results or pin an article to look at like where are people are there any trends in the search data that we can kind of make actionable. So something that we'll do pretty frequently is to actually go in and look at pinning results, especially with like what Barrett was saying earlier was people generally start their search with a pretty simple one-term search. They search email, right? And while like that's helpful, there's a lot of different there's a lot of different directions their question could ultimately go. So being able to pin kind of the most general helpful resources that will give people a jumping off point to then either refine their search and kind of like add additional long tail keywords, or to to basically just find the resource that they're looking for. So it's pretty great to be able to go in and just say like, okay, we found that like people are searching for this something like merge tag, but what they really mean is something else. So we can either pin that result or we can use synonyms. So that's another kind of cool feature. And we found that that's been really helpful, because not only are we able to adjust rankings, but basically to kind of tweak terminology that people use. So if there's some HubSpot calls our marketing automation workflows, right, versus other competitors might call it something else. So by being able to kind of use some of those terms and create synonym sets, that's been really helpful as well. Ultimately too, we give users on our knowledge base basically different feedback mechanisms to sort of let us know, oh hey, a doc is out of date, this isn't helpful, and as part of that, like by kind of combining Swiftype's data with the kind of actual feedback data, we're able to sort of not only improve the quality of the content, update docs we might have missed, or like add certain caveats, or basically improve the actual content, but we're also just able to sort of improve that experience. We might figure out from that feedback that somebody was looking for something else, and Swiftype gives us the ability to go in there and actually adjust those rankings or tweak our weighting and whatnot.
David, can you just expand a bit about what types of people are on that team, and what types of people are going in and being responsible for improving search results or looking at what people are searching for, and how many people on the team, and what kind of their roles are, and how often you guys kind of touch base on stuff?
Yeah, so I mean, basically we have essentially, we have sort of a knowledge team. It's kind of an unofficial team that lives within the support organization. There's one full-time technical writer, so that's the person who is sort of in charge of, in tasked with, creating new documentation in English. And then we have essentially a few people who are, essentially support engineers who do about 50% support work and 50% knowledge work. So they're kind of day-to-day, not in addition to maybe working in Swiftype, or I think they have one of them is the DRI for Swiftype, but in addition to actually working in improving the search experience, they're responding to customer feedback that we get through the knowledge base. So if somebody says, hey, this doc wasn't helpful, or like this is really confusing, they go and they review that feedback, and they actually go and potentially update the doc or figure out how best we can improve that experience. Are we missing something? Should it be another doc? So sometimes we just get straight support tickets through there. So it's helpful having them kind of be able to do that dual role. And then other than that, there's basically just me who is responsible for some of the more technical aspects, the templates, the JS file that we're using to actually power our search. So kind of just sort of more the experience that then the other guys are sort of doing the day-to-day work of actually maintaining this knowledge base.
Got it. That makes sense. So we got a question here from Tracy. She's asking, how would you redirect a buyer's journey, or like how would you lead someone down the right path if they're searching for something that you might not have on your existing like content library?
So one thing that we're doing is that we're actually looking at that and then creating content, right? So if somebody's sort of like looking for stuff that like, and we're able to kind of see like, okay, this person's looking for something that doesn't exist. One thing that we can do, because it's that team of people looking at it, is actually create that asset, right? Answer that question. Additionally, because we're sort of using it through this like feedback mechanism where we can email back and forth with them. It might be if somebody actually says, hey, I'm not finding what I'm looking for, then we're able to communicate with them and say, actually, you need to go here, or you need to or check this out. This might be helpful. The challenge there is for anybody who isn't, right? If anybody's looking for something and ultimately they just they do a search, they don't find it, and they give up. While we can find that in our, we can see some of that in our analytics for things like searches with no results, or searches with low conversions that people aren't clicking through. You're still making a lot more assumptions based on that data than you are when you give people an actual feedback mechanism to say like, hey, this was helpful, or this really didn't answer my question.
Got it. Thanks. So I have a question, and it's kind of going back toward how you guys are creating your content. And I don't know the answer to this, but when you guys are creating content and you need to create it for multiple languages, like you talked about expanding, are you guys using a translation service? Are you having employees that are familiar with those languages, or how are you going about that problem?
Yeah, so basically what we've done is, like I said, most of our content, all the content that I deal with is hosted on HubSpot at this point. So what we've done is we've built a couple integrations with a few kind of like third-party platforms that are built for translation, like SmartLang, CloudWords are two that come to mind. And essentially what we're able to do then is, employ, a third-party translator to work on that platform, right? So we're able to essentially say, hey, this page needs translation through, SmartLang or CloudWords. It ultimately gets sort of imported into this sort of middleman application, and the translation service can then translate the content and spit it back into HubSpot. So for the majority of our stuff, that's how we're doing it. We have some people internally who are kind of QAing it, making sure it's good. It's updating their glossary, and also like, part of what I've had to do also is make sure our templates kind of support multi-language as well. So for example, when someone, we get that page back and we change the URL, I've made it so that any kind of like terms that are defined at the template level also swap out. So, stuff that just sort of comes up over and over again, like Academy, for example, will show up as Academia in Spanish, or, German and Japanese, kind of the same way. So ultimately, for the most part, it's being done by a translation service. We built this integration to make it pretty easy in that they're able to send it back to us. And then using Swiftype, we're able to create separate engines to index that content. So we're actually able to, create a German-specific engine or a Spanish-specific engine and just index the content that's actually been translated for us. And it is human translated, so we're, rather than doing like, a mass machine translation or hosting it on a proxy, we're actually having it human translated and posted back with us, on HubSpot. So, someday as the company grows, if, we decided actually we want to hire a Spanish technical writer, or we want to hire, a German technical writer, we could do that, and we could sort of invest in those, resources the same way. But this is sort of, we found is kind of the best balance between, a cost-effective option and also creating like quality content in those languages that is better than something that like a machine translated version or something hosted on proxy.
Great. It sounds like a tough problem. I was curious what you guys are doing to tackle that. So I've got a question, and it's echoed here by Ian as well. What kinds of numbers or what kinds of things are you looking to measure, or how do you as a team say search is working better or search is not working better? What kinds of things are you looking for, and what kinds of results have you guys seen since investing in search?
Yeah, I mean, so one I kind of alluded to earlier that we're always kind of watching like a hawk is our incident rate, so our tickets per customer, and that's what we found is that's remained pretty consistent. It models with our growth, so basically which we're ultimately trying to drive down, because the more and more customers you have, the more and more like that rate, even if it's stable, you still have to hire more and more support reps. So that's something that we've definitely tried to move, and that's something that's sort of like in an ideal world it'd be great if we could to some extent deflect some of that work and actually reduce incident rate with our knowledge base. But there's also a lot of other plays in that kind of in that overall plan, which things like making the apps easier to use and investing in like the usability, other resources. So that's sort of like one that's just like kind of a big overarching one. But in terms of the actual knowledge base, what we've also started to look at is all right, so like we're getting the same number or the same rate of tickets, right? But like what are those, like how do the type of tickets changing? So when our support reps actually ultimately close tickets, they're doing things like categorizing at a couple different levels. They're categorizing like, well, what's the overall goal of this, like what's sort of the type of the case, right? And the type of the case for us is things like we walk them through like a documented solution, like so something where they could have potentially served themselves. They could have actually found that answer. The answer exists. It just wasn't surfaced right? So it wasn't, or walk them through like a really custom solution, something that was like very specific to the business, wasn't really like something that would have made sense in sort of a self-service article. Things like was it a host only thing? Was it like, did they have to actually talk to us first to get this resolved, or was it a bug? There's a whole bunch of these different type categorizations, and part of the goal of the knowledge base is to sort of reduce the number of kind of like general how-to stuff and the stuff that like we feel that like you're better served just using a doc, or and it's okay for us if we're driving that down, and incident rate is staying the same, which ideally it wouldn't. Ideally we'd be moving incident rate more, but it's been pretty consistent. You're at least able to sort of have people use the product in a more in-depth way, and like help their businesses in a more useful way. So sort of getting back to that poll question in the beginning, like it's sort of a 50-50 split in our minds. Is like we not only we care about deflecting tickets, but ultimately we also care equally about adoption and the fact that you're using more of our app, and you're like it's more sticky in the sense of that you're going to keep coming back and using HubSpot. So those are like, that's just like some kind of high level metrics. In terms of like getting more into like the nitty gritty, we look at like a lot of traffic metrics, not only traffic of like the search, but in Academy, but like so like what's our conversion percentage? Like how many of the searches, how many people are actually clicking through the results versus searching? How many people are clicking through on autocompletes? We're looking at things like basically like the we look at things like unique users and whatnot, but ultimately we're also doing some interesting work now. So it's a little bit hard to quantify, but something that we're sort of starting to work with sort of some like big data applications and pulling in kind of different data points, is looking at like, okay, well, are people how many people are repeatedly using the knowledge base, right? So somebody, and like, are those people actually submitting support tickets, right? So we're actually starting to kind of create some funnels in the sense of like somebody coming to the knowledge base, potentially then, opting to get help, but then not, submitting a ticket, right? They're self-serving, or so we're kind of starting to look at some of that too. It's relatively early days because it's kind of connecting a couple different, systems and using a couple different ways to quantify that. But, we're starting to try to also, have a better, measure of actual deflection, so we can kind of tie how successful our knowledge base is in case deflection, as well as, another thing that we monitor pretty closely is like for our overall customer base, how is app adoption trending? So we're looking at like how many different features in HubSpot are people using. So, and then like we're also comparing that to of the people who are using a ton of different features, are they actually are they engaged in the knowledge base? Are they actually using the knowledge base? So that's kind of another data point that we look at.
Great. Awesome. Very thorough answer. Very much appreciate that. Okay, so we got another question from Ruth here, and she's curious, and I think we might have touched on this earlier, but how HubSpot enables users to kind of refine what they get and narrow down on what they're looking for. So I think at least my understanding to this question, the answer would be something about how you guys have designed your search interface. On earlier slides, Ruth, you might take a look after the session. We've got screenshots of their various refinement filters that they have, and how they have all those different types of documents sorted. Do you have anything to add on there, David, or is that about enough to cover it?
Yeah, I mean, I can. So basically, like what we're doing is Swiftype, and essentially what Swiftype allows you to do is, basically load up your content with various tags that can essentially create different search dimensions. So, for example, we have our two kind of primary filters that we have built in our searches. What is kind of the overall doc type? Is it a sales doc? Is it a designer doc? And the other one is sort of like, okay, what's kind of like the topic or the component? So like for drilling into it, like, and I want to just see articles about blog or just about, a particular tool like HubSpot CRM, I can filter that and it'll filter the search. From a technical perspective, how we're doing that is you're essentially adding to your content meta tags that Swiftype's crawler reads. So for example, when somebody creates a designer doc, we have it so that it gets tagged appropriately. Automatically for them, and then Swiftype indexes that, and then when we make the queries to Swiftype, we basically say, okay, we only want, the user has selected these inputs, they've selected they only want user guides and designer docs, and they only want ones about the COS or about blog, and then we kind of filter the query accordingly. Swiftype basically will, send back any of those, those results pre-filtered based on what you searched. I mean, we've had we had to build out the front end custom because I think the default Swiftype kind of embeds don't have like that level of customization, but you could take it way further if you were doing like e-commerce or something where you need like tons of different dimensions. You definitely could do that. It's basically just being able to build that information into your template, and then Swiftype crawls that information.
Great. Thanks. So here's another question here from Jenny. She's asking about prioritization, and when you see something that comes from a product bug or product confusion, how do you quantify, or how do you kind of decide in what order to go about things, or what things to fix first, and how do you communicate that kind of stuff? What does that process look like for you guys?
Yeah, so I mean, like the main thing is ultimately, when somebody, like when something is a bug, right, most of the time it's coming in through like one of our support channels. Sometimes we'll get it in like, the feedback like, hey, this article is not helpful because when I click this button, like it doesn't do anything, right? Something that's like it starts out as feedback, but really the problem isn't anything to do with the article. It's the problem is like there's a bug in the software. So we're pretty good about actually, getting that as quickly as possible into like our project management software that developers are using. Jira is the one that we're using in our case, but basically what then the support rep kind of has the autonomy there to basically kind of set a priority level, and the priority level for us is based a lot on, okay, like, well, what's the customer impact, like what's the effect on their business. There's kind of a couple different levers that we look at to say like, okay, this is like a really weird like bug, but it's also like a particularly kind of fringe use case versus something that's like, oh, this person can't, access like a core part of why they're using HubSpot. They can't, their contacts isn't loading. So the developers are, broken into teams, and they definitely are working based on like priority, and also just, sort of like the high priority stuff gets fixed first. But that being said, it's also a matter of like, okay, how much work would it entail to be, to execute on this fix? Is it something that like, okay, this is, you know, an hour of work, or like, okay, this, because if we fix this, we have to fix this other thing. So as part of that, we try to have the support rep communicate as much as possible through Jira with the development team to kind of provide updates for customers. With regard to kind of like knowledge-based prioritization in general, that's sort of not so much related to bugs, but just like what are we, you know, we only have a couple people whose part-time job it is to do, you know, knowledge, and one full-time person. So we also have to kind of consider things like, you know, how, like, what's the most important thing coming down the pipeline? Like, what are the big features that are going to, you know, like the big redesigns or the big things that are like going to be most important? But we also are always working, like we have a backlog. So we're pretty good about tracking, okay, like this is a nice to have article, or this is a resource we really want to build. But it's not, you know, it doesn't necessarily take precedence over the you know, the really high priority stuff. So the knowledge team is working on, they use Trello just to kind of manage what, you know, everything, like all the requests that are coming in, help prioritize that and work across the team. So when it's slow and we're not getting a lot of feedback, or like we're not getting a lot of updates from the product coming through, we're able to, you know, prioritize that stuff and actually like get through that backlog. So we're able to sort of, you know, create those new docs and have them show up in search.
Great. All right, so this will be our last question. It's actually just from me. I was curious if you guys had thought about what kinds of options were you looking at when you were thinking about search, and were you ever considering building it on your own, or how much time do you think you might have saved by looking to Swiftype instead of any other options?
Yeah, I mean, we've sort of looked at, you know, a lot of the options, and there also is always, like, you know, because we're kind of a big enough company and we have development resources, we always have sort of the build it option. For us, it's, you know, the big appeal for Swiftype for us was the ability to have, you know, like some of those back end tools, and the ability to have kind of a small team, you know, actually manage that. Previously, we had been using like a Google custom search that was built out a little bit, but ultimately, you know, you need someone who can kind of manage XML files and can kind of work on this. What's nice about Swiftype is I've been able to set up, you know, some of the technical aspects of it for the team, but I'm ultimately not the one who has to, like, I'm not the one who's, you know, digging into that data and perhaps improving it. Like, anyone can do that. You know, any split shift support rep can look at that and sort of, you know, glean some insights from that data and actually make actionable improvements in Swiftype. So that's sort of like why we ultimately settled on Swiftype. Like you know, the like the idea where a lot of the other competitors that I've seen too require you to basically like sync a whole database of material. So like you have to actually somehow set up, you know, you'd have to have like servers running where you basically would be syncing data to their servers, and then you'd be querying that database. What's nice about Swiftype, much like the way Google custom search works, is that they actually are crawling your content. So the fact that it's on different systems, like, you know, you basically, like if you have someone who can, you know, a front-end engineer, you could build out a completely custom front-end powered by Swiftype. And even if you don't, you have the, like sort of the plug-and-play options of like the Swiftype embed codes.
Cool. Awesome. All right. Well, for everyone here, thanks for joining us. Thank you, David, for giving us your time this morning. Very cool story.
No problem.
And yeah. And so just for everyone here on the call, last things is obviously thanks. We're going to send out the recording this afternoon, and that survey will be coming to you right after this, and we'd really appreciate any feedback you can give us about how to improve this webinar or future webinars. So thanks, and have a great day, everyone, and bye-bye.